Welcome to the L3 podcast, also known as Love, Lies, and Lifestyles. No living person is exempt from love, the lies, and living a particular lifestyle. From sex to building wealth, this show is solely to entertain, enlighten, and empower. All topics discussed are strictly the opinion of the host and the guests that appear on the show. Here's your host, Dr. K. Hey y'all, welcome to another week of L3. I'm so excited to bring you another great episode of great topics with an amazing guest today. So much has been going on. As you know, I have dedicated the last several episodes around the state of America and what's really been happening in the Black community and the equality that we have been seeking. Legislation changes. We have seen so many different things evolve over the last month. And today, what I want to talk about, as I've seen groups come out, organizations or different groups and platforms online, asking the questions and inquiring about what does it truly mean to rebuild the Black community, recreate Black Wall Street? How do we support one another? And I sat and thought about it, and I said, you know what? People are inquiring and they don't really know the specific steps that we actually need to take to see lasting change in our community that truly allows us to have the same starting point and access to resources and equity that we have been seeking for the last 400 years. So joining me today as we start to delve into specific things that we can do within the Black community to advance ourselves, I want you to welcome my very special guest, Calvin Edwards, who is an educator and a mentor. So welcome, Calvin.
Hello, Karen. How are you doing?
Oh my gosh, I'm so glad to see you. I'm so excited to have you on the show. I love absolutely. I love partnering with like minds. And when I thought about this episode and specific steps that people can take, you popped into my mind right away. And you and I always have rich conversations, and we've been having them for more than a decade now. And I said, you know what, we cannot continue to preach to the choir. We have to now share this. And people have heard me say this over and over again, that when God gives you a gift, it is your responsibility to share it with others and not to hoard it for yourself. And I really do mean that. And so, you know, the conversations you and I have had, I was like, Calvin, we have to share this with other people. They don't know. And now people are seeking. So the question of the day, Calvin, is, what specific steps do we have to do or take in our community to build a coalition with Black-owned businesses and or to obtain the resources to truly advance our community?
So the first thing I think about is a model. And we can look at the Jewish community and how they build within themselves. They are a self-contained community, and we need to follow that model. We need to look at it closely and emulate it, and their success. And I think if we emulate that model, we'll be successful.
Tell me, what have you seen within that model that you think definitely needs to happen in the Black community that you think would work for us? Because sometimes we see things with other groups of people, and because cultural differences and beliefs and values, what may work in one community may not work in another community. So what specifically do you think we need to do in the Black community to see the success?
One major thing is education. They control their education, and that's very important. How else are you going to teach your children if you have someone else teaching them, especially the people who are oppressing you? So we need to control our education. We need to control the politics in our community and vote in every election. They vote as a block, and they specifically ask their officials what they want.
So help me understand, when you say they do it in a block, what exactly does that mean?
So if they say they're gonna back a political candidate, everyone in that community is gonna vote for that candidate, and they're gonna ask that candidate for specific things in return. And when they elect that candidate, they get those things in return.
Oh, gotcha. Okay. So, I mean, you brought up a very good point about education. Right. And so I kind of want to go back and digress a little bit to talk a little bit more about that. So I've always said desegregation actually hurt us more than it helped us. And people who don't understand that may be like, oh my gosh, why would you say something like that? And because when we were in segregation, dealing with Jim Crow and all that, we taught our own. We had our community schools and we taught our own. So what would happen was that the books and the resources that came from the more affluent communities, from the white communities, they would then send those tattered and torn books and resources, pages torn out, edges ripped off. They would send those resources to the Black schools, right? Everything was secondhand for us. However, what those educators did back then was they filled in the blanks. They did the research and they passed down oral history, right? And they really taught our children and in our community how we can thrive as people, as Black people, and how we can continue this fight for equality. And I find that once we were fighting so much for equality and to be able to attend schools and integrate schools, that once that happened, it became watered down. And now we no longer had Black people teaching Black children. And so once that happened, it became, well, we thought that we arrived and we didn't. And now we're seeing more now than ever that the schooling is worse for our children. When we think about the school to prison pipeline, when we think about the lack of resources, when we think about the teachers that are coming in that are not certified, that are not highly qualified, right? And they're not getting enough training and they're grossly underpaid. So when we think about all those things, you put all of that in a bag and then you tell people, good luck. Now we're at that point where we're starting to see everything boil over, from politics to education to the finances, right? Everything, housing, everything that has impacted us, where racism lives in this country. There's no untouched area, right? That racism touches. I find that you're absolutely right when you talk about education, that we need to control education. Like, we cannot have other people teaching our children about us, about our history. And let's be clear when I say that, we need to have qualified people. Now, I'm not saying that our schools should only be staffed with Black people, because I've come across some incompetent Black teachers as well, and they have no business in front of anyone's child. And I've come across some white educators who truly are down for the brown and for the cause, and truly genuinely care about advancing our community and speaking up and being an abolitionist to speak against the injustices that our communities face. Those are the people we want in schools. Who won't lie to us about our history. And so that's, I think you're absolutely right. We definitely need to take education back, and it needs major reform and overhaul.
Most definitely. And one of the things that the educational system is starting to talk about is culturally relevant teaching. And that's a big problem in the schools, because they don't understand. Some teachers who are not from the community don't understand the culture. And they automatically assume that this kid is acting out or is in special ed when they're just a little hyper, or, that's what they're used to in the neighborhood. Someone who comes from that neighborhood can understand and put in place the behavior management techniques that will help that student thrive.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, 80% of Black and brown children, males, let me be clear, not even female, right? Males are placed in special education. There's nothing wrong with our babies, right? Like, historically, what white people have done was they tried to use science as a way to say, like, we are genetically inferior. There's no such thing out there, right? And so because everyone is so heavily in, like, what does the research say? What does the research say? And then they manipulate the research to lie and say that something's wrong. It then justifies the supremacists, hey, like, see, something's wrong with them. And so you look at how the mistreatment of people who have special needs, right? Like, that's been historical in this country, whether you're Black or not Black, right? There's just a mistreatment of people that have special needs. And so that's what happens not only in this country, but in this world. And what also needs to happen when we bring people in from in the community is that they need ample training. Why? Because they came from the community and they themselves didn't get those resources. So then we put them in there because we think that we're checking the box and, meeting the quota. But then the cycle continues. Even when you put people from the community in schools, the cycle continues. Why? Because if you don't give them ample training, they can only come in with the training and the experience that they had. And so they repeat the same behaviors. And now we have failing schools. Right. So if they get training around how to truly support children when they are in crisis? How do you identify these behaviors? And there is definitely a difference when you have white people coming in who literally have had no interaction with
With
black
black
people
people
at all, right? Like living in this country, have not had any interaction with black people other than what they see on the TV. Right. That is the most interaction that they have. And now they become a teacher and they step into this community. So now they take all of what has been ingrained in their mind from the media, that that men are super predators, right? And that we don't care about education, and that our regard for life doesn't exist, right? Like all these thoughts that are pumped into people's minds about us. Now this white teacher steps in, and the minute a kid rolls their eyes or sucks their teeth, or they might, I don't care, right? Because that's just what kids say. Then we go, see, that's true. They don't care about school. They don't want to be taught. They don't, right? And all these isms get attached to us. All the microaggressions and macroaggressions, right, are living in those spaces.
You take away the funding and say, look how they're behaving when they don't have the adequate tools to be successful. Mm-hmm. But one of the things that I want to talk about is that the principal sets the tone in the building. Being the lead teacher, that person can set the tone and model what they want to see in the school. So if you have a strong principal or lead teacher, they can set the tone. They can look at the teachers and know if they are able to teach children of color, and if they are an ally, or if they're even of color and they need to go.
Yeah, I agree with you. Everything starts with leadership, no matter the industry.
Yep.
In education, outside of education, everything starts with leadership. And I think about when I've been into schools to coach school leaders, and where people go wrong is they believe if you are placed in a leadership role, you're a leader. And that's not true. And many people, I've come across principals with some really questionable mindsets that are just downright dangerous for children. So you think about, if you have a building of 100 staff members, that's 100 people that you are supposed to be leading, and you're passing your dangerous mindset on to theirs, right? Because research shows like the staff will take on the tone and attitude of the leader.
Just like the classroom takes on the
exactly
the teacher.
Exactly, right? And so if that leader is not strong, or they have a deficit-based mindset, and especially one that is harmful and not conducive to the betterment of children, then we continue to keep our children in this vicious cycle. And then what ends up happening, what do? We blame the children and the community. And that's not okay.
Right.
So Calvin, I do want to ask you, so we talked about education. You touched on politics so I want to go a little bit deeper in politics. Like, what specifically do we need to do when we talk about politics? Not so we vote, but then we need to have demands. You're saying like, for our vote, this is what we want. So but it goes beyond that.
Go ahead. So if we pick a specific candidate and we say we're going to back you, we're going to vote for you, these are the things that we want. And if you don't produce, when your reelection comes up, we're going to find a different candidate. And that has to be the thing. But prior to that, we have to get out and vote. I know a lot of young people who say, oh, my vote doesn't count. They really need to understand that if your vote didn't count, they wouldn't try to take it away from you.
Say that again. Say that again.
They wouldn't try to take it away from you.
Exactly. We wouldn't have laws in place to prevent you from voting.
That's right. So, and your local elections are the most important ones. Instead of the national ones, only voting for the president. You need to vote in every election, specifically your local elections, because those elections put in place judges, people who allocate money, who fix your neighborhood, who's going to build up your community. And these are the people that most of the time have an office in your neighborhood when you can march right over there and meet them and talk to them in person. And that's what we need to do. And we need to do it in droves.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. People don't understand that when voting happens, it's not just you just go and vote once every 4 years for the president. You're voting for your local elected officials is actually more important than voting for the president. And people don't understand the impact of having your local officials in place when you go and vote for your local elected officials, they impact who gets put in a chief position, right? Like you have your mayor in place, and the mayor in some cities, we especially know New York City, right? And you're looking at the partnership between the mayor and the police department, and who's the commissioner there, right? Who gets appointed? Look at who gets appointed as chancellor of education in New York, right? So all of these things start to impact your ability to actually have access and freedom that we keep asking for. And if you're not going out and voting for your local elected officials, you're doing a great injustice in your own community when your vote has the opportunity to shift who gets placed in those seats. When you start thinking about then who goes into the governor's seat, right? When you start thinking about now, that also talks about, we start talking about who sits as DA, right? Like all of these people that are making decisions, who are sitting at Capitol Hill, who are making not just local decisions, but they're sitting at the national level, coming up with laws for the state, right? And what governs a lot of what we see put in place when we start talking about harsh sentencing guidelines. These are your local officials who are putting these things in place. What else specifically do we need to do in order for our voice to have impact?
We also have to put forth candidates,
Mm-hmm.
People who have the same mindset, who that we know are going to push our agenda and build those people up. And those people could be from the community. Those are local positions. You know who works effectively in your community, who's on the board, who complains and gets things done, who calls the city to get the potholes fixed. Those are the people that you want to elect as your councilman, so that you can get the funding and you know that they're going to do the job. So we must start thinking about electing people that we know, pushing them forward to hold these positions.
Right. What one of the things I definitely want to go into, let's talk about jury duty for a moment.
Okay.
And one of the things, like, so many people hate jury duty, right? Yeah. I actually love jury duty.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, anytime I get the papers to serve, I am elated about it.
Right.
And every time I talk to people, I literally know only 2 other people in my phone book, you're one of the 2, who actually enjoy serving on jury duty. And it actually infuriates me when people are trying to get out of it, especially Black people. And so let's talk more and unpack that about why we should not be getting out of jury duty, but be excited.
That tips the scale of balance, because if you didn't vote, you didn't elect the DEA, and more than times that person is not of color or is not going to represent the community. The judge is most of the time not from the community. So the only place that we have the power to balance the scale is sitting in the jury box. And if you don't show up, then they can railroad your child to any place they want and give them absurd sentences. Just imagine this. If you did a crime, or somebody said you committed a crime, allegedly, and you were sitting in the defendant's seat, and you looked over to the jury box, and you didn't see anyone that looked like you, what do you think was going to happen?
Woo! How powerful is that, right? And so that's what people don't understand. So when we talk about a jury of your peers,
right,
we never see a jury of our peers. So
no.
when we look at, when we talk about a miscarriage of justice, when we see white police officers or white people, period, even if they're not police officers, who have wrongfully killed and murdered Black people or a person of color, and they get off, we're outraged. But why do they get off? Because they have a jury of their peers.
Right.
So there are other people on that jury that think like they do. Right. So this is why they get off, right? So it's like, if we're not sitting and serving, then they fill those seats with people who don't look like us.
And as we talked about before, their mindset. If you've never been around a Black person and all you've seen is on TV, when you're looking at defendant, you're not going to see, even though there's evidence saying that person is innocent, you're going to be like, well, they did something.
Yep.
because the images that you see of that person
Look
and
at
the
the Central Park
mindset.
Five. Exactly.
Exactly. So,
Yeah.
so it is very important to sit on the jury.
Yeah.
It's one of the things that's, I would say, is high up there in your civic duty.
Yeah. Absolutely. I completely agree with you. And I can't tell you how many times I spoke to people, even in my own family. I'm like, you need to serve. How dare you try to come up with a lie to come out to get out of jury duty? Like, and they just don't understand. The truth is, they don't understand the importance of it.
Right.
And think about, why don't they understand the importance? Because these aren't conversations we have in
Right.
our community, just on a whole period. Now, let's be clear. Across being Black or white or whatever, jury duty period, people just don't like. Right. And so in general, I know tons of white people who hate jury duty as well. People just see it as a form of punishment and torture where they have to take time off. They have to go sit in the court. People don't like having to go in the courtroom. They don't like to. But what people don't understand is this is someone's life.
Right.
Someone's life. I remember a time when I served jury duty, and the defendant was accused. It was a drug crime, and the defendant was, I mean, he was going to face a harsh sentence, and the jury was a mix. And I remember one of the women, come to find out, she actually lied, because, you know, they go down and ask you questions, different things, and that's how they start weeding out like who's going to sit on the jury. And one of the questions was, do you have any police officers in your family? And she said no. Come to find out, her son is a police officer. So, and I found that interesting when it came out, when it was time for us to deliberate, and we were in that back room, and she was the only one in the room who kept saying, that cop is not lying. He's not. And it was just, Calvin, it was so clear. The cop literally, it was something along the lines of like, when they brought in the cops, like one of them didn't sign his own name, but claimed sometimes he forgets his name. It was like something so bizarre. And it was just so obvious that they lied on this man. And she's sitting there and is so adamant that there's no way a cop would lie. And we're like, it's so obvious that they lied. Right? And then it comes out that her son is a police officer. Right. And so you think about the impact of, we have people that lie to serve, and then we have people that lie to get off of serving. And so what people need to understand is that it is incumbent upon you to serve. Why? Because if you truly want to see different outcomes for our people, then you have to sit on the jury to be representative of our people. Right. If not, we put other people, they put other people in those seats, and then we're frustrated and angry with the outcome when the verdict comes down.
Right. And it's a sacrifice. I know that is a sacrifice for some. Some people don't get paid, but what the court pays them. I know it's a sacrifice, but if it's a movement, there has to be sacrifice.
I was watching an episode last night, Dateline, and they were talking about inequality in America, and they were showing a case in Tulsa where two brothers ended up locked up for different crimes. One served 28 years, the other served 20 years, and both of them accused of a crime that they did not commit. Right. 28 years. He was taken away. I think they said it was like a month before his daughter was born. He missed 28 years with his daughter for a crime he did not commit. And come to find out, it was the same DA that oversaw both cases. I mean, just, it's horrific when you think about the constant injustice against our community.
Let me guess, an all-white jury.
Oh, you know it.
That speaks for itself. That's why it's important that we serve.
Yeah, and what I loved and found so important, and you could see how touched they were, was when a white man stepped up and said, something is wrong here. Something is wrong. And he took on the case, looked into it, and found everything that was stated in the paperwork was a lie. A lie. And thank God, when they were finally able to represent this to the judge said, you know, and realized, like, these people were railroaded, they were wrongfully convicted, and overturned his case.
Yeah, but how you get those years back? It's a little late for that.
Exactly. You can't. You can't. And literally, the number amounted to something of the sort around the amount. It was like 61% of people lately have had their cases overturned who were innocently convicted, served a total. I think the number was, and don't quote me on this, but the number was something around like 16,000 years in prison. You know, and I'm just like, how are people not bothered by that?
That's why it's imperative that we serve.
Very imperative. So you all heard it here. Like, we must serve jury duty. You must vote in your local, and for your local elected officials. I mean, you just,
and you need to be a voice as a parent in your school, your children's education. You need to go to the school. You need to talk to the principal. You need to talk to your child's teacher, see where their mindset is, and get a clear view of what is going on in your child's school.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Getting access to curriculum and resources, like what's being taught. And so in a lot of our schools, they're not getting Black history the way they should, right? And I think about, I was in one school in California, and the librarian, such a sweetheart, white woman, and she was in charge of ordering the books. And it's funny, I ended up doing a training there, and she wasn't part of the training, but it was the training was in the library, and she was listening to the training. And at the end of the day, she spoke to me. She was like, "You are so inspiring and encouraging." And I don't know, and just to be fair, I'm not sure if this was something, what I'm about to say, I'm not sure if this is something she did before the training or if my training inspired her to do what I'm about to say. But when I got back there, I think like 2 months later, she was so excited to see me. She was like, "I ordered a list of Black literature for the kids to have representation of them." And she showed me, and like all these boxes started coming in, and she was so excited. She's like, "Our kids haven't had that before, and I'm excited to do this." And I just thought about how powerful that was, that she was the gatekeeper of that. And thinking about, if my training had that impact on her, look how powerful that can be.
Even though she's a nice person, she just didn't know.
She just didn't know. Yeah, she just didn't know. And so, there is a innocence of ignorance for some people, like true ignorance of they really just don't know. There's so much resources out there. We have Black people who don't know where to go and get the resources, right? So it's not about pointing the finger. And I think a lot of times white people get scared and they think it's, we're going to get into this accusation and the blame game. And it's not about that, right? Like we know what it is. We need to move forward. And this is how we need your support to move forward.
I think one thing is that we all are complicit in saying Black history. It's not Black history, it's American history. Mm-hmm. And we need to weave it into the history. Mm-hmm. They cannot be separated. Mm-hmm. They are one and the same. And that's why it's important that we teach it. Mm-hmm. And that will bring us together. Yes, that was the original sin. How can we move forward to make it better? Let's learn from the past by teaching it correctly and moving on from that.
Yeah. And you're so right, Calvin. And as Black people as a whole, we're not just, as a group of people, we're not a revengeful, that's not part of our nature naturally. Like, we're not violent. That's not part of our nature, right? But everything that we're not, we've been pegged as being that.
Well, usually that's self-evidence, just like 45 does. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. If he calls someone stupid, that means you're stupid. If you say someone is violent, that means you're violent.
Right. Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I do. So we've heard it now. So let's name off, because people need to be clear on the steps that they need to take. So we talked about education and how to get involved in education. And the best way for you to get involved, even if you don't have children, is you need to know who is sitting on the school board. If you have a school board, in New York City, you don't have a school board, but they do have the PEP, right? PEP. And so they have their monthly meetings. I know before they used to do them in Brooklyn, not sure if they still do them there or where else they do them, but you can go to the PEP meetings. And they also have the local meeting. Off the top of my head, I can't remember the name of it, but all of the districts also have their local meetings to talk about what's happening in that district. You should attend. You need to attend to know what's happening, because education is the key to a lot of the access and the freedom that people are speaking. This is why it was illegal for slaves to read, right? And for us to get that knowledge. And once you give people that access, you give them power.
Right.
So we spoke about education. We spoke about the politics, right? Going to vote for local elected officials. You can't just vote once every 4 years for the president. I don't care if you got to stand online 10 hours, stand on line.
Like I said, it's a sacrifice.
It's the sacrifice, but you're setting this up for your life. Right? For your life. And third, we talked about jury duty, right? And how important that is. You need to serve. We know it's daunting when that notice comes in the mail. I personally get excited for it, and I want our people to start getting excited because this is the way for your voice to be heard. I don't care if you end up not being selected. The fact that you went down there, you showed up, you gave honest answers, that is your obligation to our community so that we can have representation, because none of us are immune to being accused of a crime that we did not commit. And so if that is you or your loved one sitting there on trial, you want to look over and be able to identify people that look like you.
Have fair representation.
Absolutely.
And so we're going to talk about economics.
Let's go for it. I know you love it. I know you that this is your favorite part.
So I think, from when I was a kid, my father always took his change and put it in a sock for a rainy day. And that's what we need to do. When you get paid, you need to put some money away for a rainy day and let it build. Put it in something that's going to give you interest. And we have to teach our children about finances and not to expend it as soon as you get it. And I know we are people who come from nothing in this country, and we like to adorn ourselves and have the best. So that all comes from not having.
Yeah.
But we need to hold back on it. Some. I'm not going to say totally. Some. You don't have to have the $200 sneakers. How about getting $100 sneakers and put $100 aside?
Right.
So you still have your sneakers and you have $100 in savings that's earning interest.
So I come from a family of savers, and I remember my aunt said to me, I don't care if it's just 25 cents from your paycheck. You better put it away and save. And that stayed with me because I remember, especially as I got older and I started making a little bit more money, you get excited. And because we don't really talk about economics in our community, you see stuff, you want to go buy it. I didn't grow up with money, having access to a lot of resources. We weren't the kids that had the name brand, everything that all the other kids had in school. And so when I got to a certain age and I was able to afford some of that stuff, I remember I got excited to go out and buy, right? Like it was like showing like, hey, I can afford that now, right? And realizing like, I don't know where those things are now, right? But that money, had it been saved, could have accrued interest. I could have used it to invest in something. And these are the things that we need to teach our kids. You're absolutely right. We do not need to teach them about going out to spend right away, but how do you save? How do you invest? And how do you flip your money, right? How do you get your money to a point where your money starts working for you and you're not working for it?
Right.
And we don't have those conversations. And you're right. I think there's a mindset of like, we have to show that we have money. So the more expensive stuff I have, that Louis Vuitton bag on my shoulder, I got those Jordans on my feet, or the chains and the rings and just the bling and how big is my diamond ring, right? And it's like, or my car, for example, right? And so if I can show these flashing things, then people will see me in another regard and see that I made it. And then what ends up happening in our community is now you have the younger generation looking up and say, well, that's what I want too. Right. And that's not what we want them to look up and say.
Right. The value is placed on the wrong thing.
Absolutely. You're absolutely right.
Now this can get back into politics. Now, if you save that money and you have a chunk of money, now you can give it to a political candidate, which is tax deductible, and you're going to put in place somebody that's going to think like you, who's going to vote on your issues, than having those sneakers and living in poverty.
Yeah. No, you are absolutely right.
So all of these things interconnect. And we have to start thinking of it as that. That one thing plays on another. And
Right.
economics control all the rest of the things. And we need to become intelligent on it,
Right.
And it's very
Yeah.
important. And one thing that
Yeah.
I think that everyone should have is life insurance.
Yes. Oh yeah. That's definitely a topic that I'm talking about on another episode. But yes, we don't understand the value and the impact of life insurance.
Right. Because, and then you have to teach your children how to spend that money because after you pass away and you work hard, they want to be driving around in a nice new car wearing
Right.
Jordans, which is just a waste.
Yes.
They need to know to invest in a property. You
Yes.
buy stocks and bonds. You do things that's going to make your money appreciate.
And there's a reason why economics are not taught in school.
Right.
Not in our schools.
No, it's not.
Right? Like schools with children that look like me do not get classes on economics and finances, credit, right? Like our kids, like just thinking about the importance of credit. Like growing up, we just didn't have those conversations in my household, right? Like my family are immigrants and coming to this country, like, in the Caribbean, you don't have credit, right? You don't have a credit score. And so coming here and my mom had to learn about what it means for credit. She never talked to us about it, but when she learned about it, that was information that she just didn't share with us that I think again goes back to like, oh, they're children. They don't need to know about this. This is grown up stuff, right? But the impact of passing that knowledge on from young, you now create discipline in your kids, right? And now they're not trying to catch up when they become adults. This is something that is disciplined within them. And now they know how to budget. They know how to spend, like they know how to write a check like that. My mom did teach me that. Like I learned that. Like, we didn't learn those things in school. I went to one school. I remember I was in a school and I would say less than 5% of the population had Black and brown children. And they were actually, the teacher was doing a lesson on how to write a check. And that was the first time I was like, wow, I've never seen that in schools with children that look like me. However, she was teaching them incorrectly how to write a check. And I was like, oh gosh, okay. And I had to pull it to the side. Right. And I was like, that's not the right way of writing a check. Right. So she was like, oh my gosh, I didn't realize.
But one thing that's easy and simple to start with, the kids are with you when you're shopping.
They are.
You can figure out the budget. How much is you put it in the cart?
Exactly.
It's going to be when we get to the cashier.
Yep.
Get them to start thinking about money in that way.
Exactly.
And
how to use coupons and deduct, and where do we save so that we're not wasting our money away if we have the manufacturer providing coupons for this, right? And so you're absolutely right. That is a phenomenal way to start, is at the supermarket. Like, this is all we have. This is what we need to get. How do we ensure that we can get everything? Or can we not get everything, but what can we get possibly that might cover a 2-for-1?
Right. And you build in rewards in that. If you can come within $20, you can get $1.
Yes.
Give them incentive.
I like that. I like that.
You get that dollar, you put it in the bank. You tell them, put 50 cents in the bank. Yes. And that way you're showing them how to save. You take some for yourself and you save some.
Yes, absolutely, Calvin. You hit on some really good points. So we now know, y'all, you've heard it here. We've shared some great tips. Again, obviously, everything that we talked about here is based on our opinion. But I do strongly believe that these are the steps we need to take within our community. There's so many things we need to do. On the other episode, you heard me talking about with Alicia Daniel Hall on estate planning, making sure you have your living will in place, your last will and testament, and your power of attorney. On this episode, you're hearing with me and Calvin talking about you're needing to vote in your local election and the national election. Your local election is even more important than the national election. Serving on jury duty, no more throwing those letters away, ignoring or making up excuses as to why you can't serve. We also heard about education, taking over that and knowing what is being taught in schools. Even if you don't have children, you're showing up at the board meetings to talk about and hear what are the plans for education, how are they supporting teachers, what's going on. You have every right to inquire about that. And then the last thing we spoke about was economics and how do we teach our kids to save? What are some basic things we can start to do in the household? Talk about credit. Or the impact and all of that when we're able to come together, pool our resources together. These are the ways that we're going to be able to recreate the Black Wall Street. There's such a surge right now. Black businesses and Black banks have seen since all these protests of people coming together. And I said, you know what, there's always that silver lining that comes out of a tragedy. And hopefully this is something that we will continue to do and that we won't stop doing as a people and that we don't become lax. And the pandemic has helped us in a way, because as long as things have been shut down, people have time.
Right.
They have time to look things up. They have time to go and open up these accounts. They have time to look for more Black businesses. Like, I think about just the other day, I went shopping. Um, and I was looking for a hair product, and one of the hair products I was using, come to find, wasn't Black owned, and I was mortified, right? And so I was like, I'm like, I want to find Black businesses, and so I got the list, and it took me about 40 minutes because I was going through every single item looking for that product. I literally went to different stores because I wasn't going to stop until I got the product that I wanted that was Black owned.
Okay.
Because I mean, we understand our hair. I want products that are going in my hair that is for my hair texture and my hair type. And so that was really important to me. And so having that time to do that, I think has been the blessing for us, is having the time to come together and start to network. And it's going to be rough in the beginning. There's going to be fighting. People are going to have all different kinds of opinions because there's so many resources now and access to resources. There are things out there that are not accurate, but we have to remain patient with each other. And we cannot walk away and throw our hands up and say, see, we can't do this as Black people. We absolutely can.
Having conversations.
Yeah.
Yep. Having conversations and getting ideas and working together. And that's important.
Yeah.
Just to begin the conversation with someone who you wouldn't have talked about finances with, or
exactly.
certain duty.
Yeah.
And giving them the idea and letting them see it clearly. Something you say that will trigger them to be like, yeah, I want to serve.
Right. You're absolutely right, Calvin. And
looking at their children like, yeah, I would want somebody that looks like my baby to sit on jury if they're in trouble.
Mm-hmm. No, you hit that 100%. We definitely need to start one thing at a time, but you can't look at it. It's not too big of an issue for us to
can't be overwhelmed.
Yeah. And I get it, right? You're starting off fresh, but you take and start in the area where you feel like, okay, I feel like I have a strong hold on this. Let me start here. So if it's teaching, doing the budget with your child, going to the supermarket and teaching that, you start there. It's getting your living will, that you better be starting there, right? Like, you want to have that in place, and your last will and testament, because you don't want people fighting over your children. You don't want your children to end up going to the state. Right. And these are the things, we often think about, well, I'm not rich, I don't need to have a will. The insurance piece, we're definitely on our next episode going deeper into that, on like, you better have insurance, especially if you have children. But the mistake we make is that we don't need insurance if we don't have children. And yeah, you should.
Right.
So that would be
one. I was thinking about this for a long time, and I even talked to my friend who was a retired police officer, and it was about policing. I brought up the notion to him. I was like, what if all Black people were insured, life insurance? And when police started to kill them in the street, would these companies force the hands of mayors and local officials to cut that nonsense out? Because it has a financial burden on those companies.
Yep.
So that's
powerful.
I've been thinking about. Like,
that's
maybe
powerful.
That's one way to stop it.
Yeah. I mean, once you hit people financially, you see a whole different response.
Right.
And so that's where we have to go. When you think about that bus boycott, right? It was 380, 1 or 2 days or something like that. But the financial impact and the commitment and the unity of Black people to say, for 381 days, we are not going to pay to ride the bus.
That's that sacrifice.
That was one of the most powerful things ever done in history.
Yes.
Absolutely. So you're right. You're absolutely right when you talk about that. If we get the companies now coming forward, if we had life insurance now, the impact of those companies having to pay out to so many families, they don't want to have to pay out.
Exactly.
Right? The goal is to be in business to make as much money. Exactly. Thank you for that, Calvin. I appreciate your time and most of all, your wisdom.
Thank you.
Yes. And I want you to please come back again.
Anytime.
So many great things to talk about, and you're always welcome on this show. Know that.
Thank you.
Absolutely, Cal. Thank you. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye. So you heard it here on L3. Thank you for joining me for another week. See you. Love yourself and love the people around you. Take care and be well. Peace.